Hey, I'm Theo, and thank you for joining me. Today, I wanted to go over some cards that Blizzard hasn't really been able to balance. We've recently had a lot of balance patches, so I wanted to take a look at old balance patches and see what cards they haven't been able to balance properly. I've gone over all the balance patches to find the cards, and that's how I got to this list. This list isn't really a top 10 style list, so I've ordered them in terms of release date, going from all the way back to Classic. You can probably guess which card that's going to be, all the way up to Badlands. Also, I've only put cards here that have been changed multiple times. So even though cards like Kazakhstan, Jailer, Tony, York, yeah, they've been pretty significantly changed, then you could argue Blizzard hasn't been able to balance these. They only got changed once, so that's why I won't be putting them on this list. Now, this video took me a lot of work to put together, so if you enjoyed it, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and that would help out the channel a lot. Now let's get started with the very first card, and yes, of course, this is the Warsong Commander. This card got changed a couple of times, and yeah, it started as a 3-mana 2/3. Whenever you summon a minion with 3 or less attack, give it charge. Now I believe this card had some problems in the beta as well, but I don't really want to look at its stuff. I only want to look at when the game really got released. But from what I can remember, this card really didn't see that much play for quite a while. That was until Blackrock Mountain got released, and they gave us Grim Patron, and yeah, that card was pretty good combination with Frothing Berserker and the Warsong Commander. And yeah, I think it was the best deck for a while. It was difficult to play, and yeah, it was kind of hard to counter. So eventually they did nerf Warsong Commander, and yeah, they didn't just nerf it, they absolutely obliterated it. Because they made it that it gave charge minions +1 attack. Yeah, absolutely useless. So that's why some people still call yeah, a huge nerf to a card it getting Warsong Commandered. And yeah, you can see why, because yeah, this is an absolutely useless card after it got nerfed. Some years later though, they did change it. They made all your other minions that you summoned get rush. But yeah, it never really saw play. And they eventually changed it back to the old one. It gave your minions with 3 attack or less charge again, but yeah, it hasn't really seen play since it got reverted. And there are 2 more cards from Classic that you could consider, I think, putting on this list, which are Equality and Molten Giants. They got both changed multiple times, but didn't feel like it quite fit on this list of not being able to get balanced. But if you think they do, that's fine. And then next up, well, we're gonna take a big jump of about 5 years, I believe, to Fortune of Barons, where we got the Celestial Alignment, one of the most toxic cards ever. And yeah, this card was absolutely horrible to play against. I really hated it. What did it do? Well, it set each player to 0 mana and made all the cards in your hand and deck cost 1. So while it did allow you to go first with playing a card for 1 mana, yeah, that usually wasn't very good. You got to play 1 card, which, yeah, maybe if you had a big card, that could be good. Like, you know, yeah, the 10 mana card you could suddenly play. That's good, but yeah, outside of that, usually it really hurt and it was really unfun. It made decks like Discover decks just unplayable because all the Discover cards got their full cost while you had like 2 or 3 mana and they were just unplayable. Also, if you're playing like a deck with a lot of low-cost cards, yeah, you suddenly had no mana, but all your cards still cost about the same. And of course, the Druid had an absolutely insane deck when they played this, because yeah, they built their deck around this and got to do crazy stuff with it. They could immediately nourish, they get 2 more mana every turn after that, plus they gain 1 more mana that turn, so they got to play 2 cards, and there was all kinds of crazy synergies. But even though they should have, I think, reworked the card, all they did was nerf it by 1 mana. But yeah, this card design was problematic, so eventually they did rework it a little bit, although not as much as I would have liked. But they made it so that the opponent didn't get affected by it anymore. So it was a good change. Not enough, but it was a good change. So now you didn't actually get affected by it, and yeah, it made it a bit more fun to play against it, but still kind of horrible. And then next up, we have Ash of Outland. Yeah, you might see a lot of these cards are very recent. Why is that? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. A lot of these cards are in the last couple of years. And then we'll start with Kael'thas. Sunstrider is 6 mana 4/7. Every 3rd spell you cast each turn costs 0. And yeah, you'll see this more often on this list, but yeah, cards, big other cards cost 1 or 0, just as we just saw Celestial Alignment. it's pretty problematic, and I really hope they stop doing that. This card, pretty strong, especially in a deck like Druid, where you got to cast big spells with 0 mana. It was perfect in Druid, because you had a few big spells, and you had a lot of cheap spells like Innervate, which made this really easy to pull off. It was an absolute terror in a Wild. So eventually they nerfed it, but yeah, just like with Celestial Alignment, they first nerfed it by 1 mana. Turns out, yeah, this card is just problematic, so they now made the third spell cost 1, so you couldn't just spam a whole bunch of stuff, so that's good. But yeah, what they then did was, once it rotated the Wild, they reverted it, and that wasn't very smart. Yeah, the card kind of broke Wild, so they immediately had to nerf it again. This time though, they made it 6 mana, and the third spell cost 1, and that's still the version it has today. Pretty problematic card. And then, well, this honorable mention goes to the other Kael'thas, which is Kael'thas Sinstrider. It's a kind of similar card to Kael'thas Sunstrider, in that it makes your third minion this time cost 0 instead of third spell. Now again, making cards cost 0 is problematic. Same with this. By the time this got released, we had in Nethria, you had Bran, you had Sire the Nethrius, and yeah, that was a pretty broken combo. Most decks were running this combo because you played this, it counted itself as the first minion, then you played Bran, and then your Denethrius was 0, and yeah, that usually won the games. Often it came down to who got this combo first, or who got Denethrius first. And yeah, pretty busted card, but yeah, it only got changed once, so I just wanted to mention it to the other Kael'thas. Now, next up we have Mindrender Illucia. Yeah, some people's not so favorite card. It started as a 2 mana 1/3, Battlecry, swap hands and decks of your opponent until your next turn. So yeah, what this meant was that it was a really good anti-combo card. So you got the whole hand for a turn for just 2 mana. And yeah, well, they got your hand for a turn, which sometimes could be bad, but usually if you're playing against a combo deck, you don't mind giving them your hand for a turn. But what it did allow you is yeah, take away some vital combo pieces. For example, against a rogue, you could just easily take away the Shadow Step. And, well, you could actually swap back then. But yeah, just take away some vital combo pieces with this. And yeah, it was really good against those decks. Even sometimes also in slower matchups. It was very good because, yeah, you just got to steal their value cards or just throw away value for free, basically, if your hand was bad to give to them. Pretty toxic card, and that's why it got nerfed to 3 mana. And that's where it stayed for a while, and yeah, it was still the same, but a bit slower. And it wasn't really as problematic, although it's still very much hated. But it really became a problem again with the release of Stormwind, where we got the Shadow Priest archetype. And yeah, Shadow Priest didn't really use this card in a way that it got originally used, where you wanted to take away like combo pieces from the opponent. But it got used kind of as a time warp, where you got an extra turn. Because, well, in an aggro deck, you're going to be low on cards. Hard to imagine nowadays. But yeah, you got low on cards. And then you play this card and you give your opponent 0 cards. You didn't really care what cards you got from your opponent. It was more about, yeah, giving your opponent 0 cards. They got 1 top deck, and that was usually it. And yeah, if you build a board, you play this, yeah, your opponent couldn't really react to it. So that's why it kind of was seen as a time warp. That was pretty dumb, just for 3 mana, basically getting an extra turn. And this got eventually changed to kind of a whole new card where you replaced your hand with a copy of your opponent's hand at the end of turn. So no longer did your opponent get actually affected by this. But you still got that card, so there was still ways to use this. But yeah, it's some more fringe play after this. And yeah, there was still ways to copy stuff though, like if your opponent produced a whole hand, you could actually sometimes yeah, copy their hand still and just do their combo before they did it. But yeah, it was a lot harder to use and hasn't really seen too much play since then. Let's go to some Stormwind cards with, well, I'm going to put 4 cards here, although I think Darklight isn't actually from Stormwind. But yeah, these all 4 cards are related, so I'm going to put them here. And combined, we've had the Demon Seed, Steal of Souls, Rune Mithril Rod, and Darklight. They all got that changed multiple times, because yeah, they're all pretty problematic. They all let you cheat a lot of mana. They all were not very fun to face. First of all, we had the Demon Seed, one of the most problematic cards ever, I'd say. I put it on my top 10 list as well of strongest cards ever on number 2. All these cards were just problematic in that they cheated out massive amounts of mana, and often there wasn't really a whole lot of counterplay. So like I said, all these cards got changed multiple times. Demon Seed used to be take 6, 7, 8 damage, and then now it's 10, 10, and 10 damage that you need to take to complete it. But yeah, this card is still problematic and well to this day. We've had Steal of Souls being changed. I think also Demon Seed of Steal of Souls got banned at some point in Wild. Yeah, Steal of Souls got changed to a 6 mana 4/8. That got eventually changed to 4 mana 2/6 again, but only the first card. Root Mithril Rod went from 3 to 4 to 5 mana. Yeah, and it was still a crazy card because it's 5 mana and then allows you to cheat up to 20 mana. And yeah, that's a crazy amount of mana cheat. Allows you to do all kinds of combos. So yeah, crazy that they released it at 3 mana. Then we've had Dark Lair, still being played well to this day. Got released as a refreshed 2 mana crystals. Then it got nerfed, although its mana cost got buffed to 2 mana and 1 mana crystal, and now it's 3 mana refreshed 1 mana crystal, but it's still good because there's so many cheap cards. It's self-damaged, so it still allows you to cheat a whole lot of mana. These cards are just problematic, all combined. I think didn't really want to cover them one by one because they were kind of related to each other, so that's why I put them all together. And then next up, we have possibly like one of the most changed cards we've had in history, which is the Wildpaw Gnoll. And it started as a 5 mana 4/5 rush, costs 1 less for each card you've added to your hand from another class. And this card was so good, not because you could play it in a Thief Rogue and then generate 5 cards from other classes, but because you had Maestra, which allowed you to start as another class, and that meant that all your rogue cards that you drew after the mulligan, well, they counted as cards from other classes, so they reduced this. And also you had multiple tradables, like the weapon, that made it really easy to draw a bunch of cards early, and reduce this to 0 as early as turn 2. And yeah, that was pretty powerful, getting this card to 0 mana on turn 2, and then sometimes even 2 of them. It was so powerful that even decks that ran no Thief cards at all just played this, just due to the sheer power of Wildpaw Gnoll. This card terrorized the standard for a while. I think they didn't balance it for a while due to holidays and stuff, so yeah, it was a pretty awful time. Eventually nerfed it though, to a 6 mana 3/5, so it got played a bunch less. But then after a while they changed this card back again to the original one, and yeah, that was a bit weird because it was so broken. And turns out it was still problematic, so they had to nerf it again to a 3 attack card. But sometime later again, this card became problematic again, so they finally decided to rework it and made it that it wasn't just another class, but made it actually a non-rogue class. So the Maestra synergy was gone, and you actually had to play it in a Thief deck, and yeah, that kind of meant this card wasn't played a lot. Yeah, lots of changes to this card, and yeah, it really defined the meta for quite some time. And then next up we have Spitelash Siren. It's almost similar to the Gnoll, where it got changed back and forth multiple times, and again, mass mana cheat, it's problematic, and this card certainly does that. So it's a 4 mana 2/5 after you play a Naga, refresh 2 mana crystals. And then once you play it, it means, well, you play a spell, you refresh 2 mana crystals, and then it goes back again. So yeah, you played a spell, a Naga, and you never really ran out of mana with this card. So yeah, for 4 mana it was pretty problematic. You could see huge boards as early as turn 4, this card, and a 1 mana Naga, and that wasn't very fun to face, so they nerfed it to a 5 mana 2/6. And it got played a whole lot less because you didn't have those early blowout turns anymore, or less of them. You couldn't play 2 of them anymore. And then, after some time, they apparently forgot how bad this card was, and they unnerfed it. But then after a while, they had to nerf it again because we got some new spells, some new Nagas that had synergy with this. They went back again to a 5 mana 2/6. So yeah, mass mana cheat, it's problematic. Next up is a card that isn't really actually mana cheat, but it's Switcheroo, which started as a 3 mana, draw 2 minions, swap their stats. And now in a normal deck, this might be fine. It's got played in normal decks as well, because it's, well, draw 2. And with potentially an upside, what this got really abused in is decks that were running like 1 minion that duplicated itself, a cheap minion. And then it was running like a Deathwing. So yeah, you play this card, and then you swap Deathwing with the duplicate spell. And then suddenly on turn 3 you play it and you have 2 24 minions. And well, that isn't very fun. The same thing was happening in Wild, I think. But you had stuff like Charge there, and yeah, a whole lot more problems. But yeah, in Standard you just had that stuff early on. Didn't really make for fun games where the game was decided on turn 3. So they changed it to just swap health. But yeah, that still remained a problem in Wild. So that I think banned it at some point, and then eventually once it rotated from Standard, they nerfed it by 2 mana. And yeah, I don't think it sees a lot of play now. Because yeah, 5 mana to draw 2, that's pretty expensive. And then next up we have, well, multiple cards. But yeah, it's kind of one mechanic, so I put them again together, which is the Wild Seeds. Well, they're basically 4 cards that summon Wild Seeds, and then there's 3 different Wild Seeds. So the cards with Wild Seeds never really got nerfed themselves, but the Wild Seeds got nerfed multiple times. So yeah, there were a bunch of changes here. First of all, we had the Stag Spirit that got changed. First of all, that it was a 3 mana 5/4, dormant for 3 turns. Find this awakens, equip a 4/2 Great Bow. Now that got changed to a 3/2 Great Bow, and eventually the stats also got changed to a 4/3. We've had the Bear Spirit, 2 mana 2/5 Taunt, dormant for 2 turns. Go from a 2/5 to a 2/4, so small nerf. And then eventually we also had the Fox Spirit Wild Seed. Go from a 1 mana 3/1 Rush, dormant for 1 turn. Go to a 2/1. I don't think this last one was really necessary. And I think it's kind of killed Hunter for a little bit as well. These cards had a bunch of changes. The Wild Spirits were really strong. Arlon, the Spirit Poacher, and especially the Wild Spirits were extremely strong. And they had pretty much got played in in any Hunter deck. Just really strong cards. That's why they had to be nerfed multiple times. Because even though Dormant usually is pretty bad, yeah, these cards were pretty overstated for what they did. And especially with the Wild Spirits, they weren't dormant for very long. And then next up we have an Ubrakan, an 8 mana 7/7. Battlecry, gain 8 armor. This turn your minions cost armor instead of mana. Another card with mass mana cheat. There were a bunch of combos with this. Usually it involved either some OTK deck or just suddenly a huge board. And yeah, there were a bunch of easy ways to gain armor, so yeah, this got to cheat out a whole lot of stuff. Pretty toxic when cards just don't cost mana. So eventually I had to change it to just 3 minions that don't cost mana, but instead cost armor. But now this still was problematic because you could still gain a bunch of big stuff. And eventually they changed it to 5 armor. So you actually had to have some armor in advance to use this, instead of just have all the armor just from this card itself. So yeah, pretty toxic card, and enabled a lot of combos. So yeah, they really had to change this multiple times. And then the next one is another card with massive amounts of mana cheat. It's almost like a trend is going on here. We have Thaddius Monstrosity from the March of the Lich King mini set, the 10 mana 11/11 Taunt. And it started with your odd cost cards cost 1. Now again, making any card, although half the cards I guess this time, cost 1. Yeah, it's pretty problematic. Especially with a deck like Warlock, where you early on could cheat this out with the Slime. And get this on board as early as turn 5. And then, yeah, it wasn't just an 11/11, it also allowed you to play a bunch of other cards for 1 mana. It swapped to even, you could just play the Thaddius for 1 mana. You had, yeah, a whole lot of big stuff you could play with this. And then, yeah, if you couldn't deal with the first one immediately, then you were in all kinds of trouble. It allowed for some very degenerate gameplay. So, yeah, naturally this had to get changed. So what they did was make it that your odd cost cards now cost 4 less. And while this made it so that your high cost cards couldn't be cheated out early, it did result eventually in decks that were running only even cost cards that were a 4, 2, or 0 mana. And yeah, they all cost 0. And again, you get a whole lot of problems when every card costs 0. You had it in Druid, where you had the card that generates fire spells for every spell you play. And there are a lot of even cards there as well, so you get to spam those cards forever for free. You got to copy this card, so pretty much every even card cost 0. And yeah, just a big problem, and eventually they had to change it again. Now the odd cost cards cost 2 less, and yeah, that was kind of enough to finally get rid of this card. And then as the last card, the most recent card on this list, we have Shadow Reflections, a priest druid spell, though it really feels like just a druid spell. Choose a minion for 5 mana, add a copy of it to your hand, deck, and battlefield. And well, yeah, standalone this card might not be so problematic. We've got this little card called Eonar, and yeah, that kind of made this card pretty problematic. You play your Eonar, you reset your mana, you copy Eonar, and suddenly you have 2 Eonars on board. You got 5 mana left, an Eonar in your hand, an Eonar in your deck, and yeah, 1 Eonar that can either heal you to full or draw your whole hand. There were some other cards you could copy. It was mostly used with Eonar, but yeah, you could also copy maybe a charge minion or some other big thing like a Thaddius. So yeah, this card was pretty problematic with those cards that cheated a lot of mana, so eventually it got nerfed, where it removed the copy that you got in your hand. And while that did nerf the card a bit, you no longer had another Eonar to go next turn, it was still pretty problematic, as multiple Eonars is problematic, so eventually I had to change it again, where I had to choose a non-Titan minion instead of just any minion. And yeah, that really nerfed the card by a lot, and that made it kind of not see play anymore. And what they eventually did was just replace this card with the cover artist, which didn't give you any more copies in your hand or deck, but it did just copy it, and it even cost one less. But yeah, it definitely was a nerf that you didn't get another copy, but it still exists, and it still can be kind of problematic, that combination. But yeah, this card did get nerfed into unplayability eventually. So yeah, we're not seeing a lot of this card anymore. And that is it for this is a video of cards that the Blizzard just couldn't balance. Let me know in the comments what you thought of it, and if I missed any cards. Thank you for watching, and until next time.